in attendance.
No, I'm not sure why he's not here yet, but I'll make the alternative that it does proceed to the Agriculture Land Commission.
Okay, so you're moving that it proceeds
Yeah.
to the Agricultural Land Commission? Seconded? Any discussion? Not seeing, oh, there's a hand on the screen there. Is that?
On my shot there, but I didn't do that.
Okay, you're not, okay, it's gone. All right, any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. This one is corporate. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to Public Works, Solid Waste Management Plan, CAO.
Thank you again. The purpose of this report is to strengthen the Technical and Public Advisory Committee to assist in the development of a solid waste management plan consistent with the provincial guidelines. And the staff recommendation is that the regional district remove Ryan Graham as the appointment chair of the Solid Waste Management Plan meeting of the Public Advisory Committee and Technical Advisory Committee, and further, that a new director and alternate director be appointed to chair the two committees for the review and statement for the Solid Waste Management Plan, and further, that the regional district approve the addition of the Public Advisory Committee members as outlined in the administrative report by Senior Management of Public Works dated on February 6, 2025. And Mr. Fillion is here to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. I think we need to add a name to that, though. I understand that Director Gilbert is temporarily chairing it. Director Monteith?
Thank you. Through the chair, I'd like to nominate Director Roberts.
As one of those? You're okay with that? Anybody else that wanted to step into this role? We have Director Gilbert and Director Roberts at the moment, and we need the two. Not seeing any others. So we'll add that to the motion then. Director Gilbert and Director Roberts would be the two stepping into that role. Director Gilbert?
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. Just to clarify, who will be the director, who will be the alternate, and who will be the chair?
Unless Director Roberts wants to argue the fact, I understood it would be you and him as the alternate. Okay, so we're all clear?
Chair? No.
Go ahead.
We have a problem. I think we should stop the meeting temporarily. We have some directors online that appear to be in another online meeting, attempting to be in this meeting.
A technical glitch of some sort? I couldn't find anybody on the screen, so we'll just recess for a moment until we can work this in somehow. You're okay with
Adam, Director Taylor's trying to get into.
Yeah, we sent him.
Does anybody have sound?
I don't have sound in the boardroom.
We're just on pause for a moment here.
Yeah.
Sound should be fine.
Are we making any headway with Director Conan's?
Okay, no facetious comments. Is she calling in from Penticton or further away?
I'm not sure. She was touching bases with Director Bloomfield that she is trying to get on.
Martin looks rather stoic.
Mhm.
So is there next?
Okay, I'm in. Thank you.
Okay, I believe we've got the missing 6. Sorry, folks, I don't know what happened there, but we do have everybody online. Can you hear us here in the boardroom? Okay. We had started without you. I will give you a quick update as to where we're at. We're down to C1, but item B1 was approved as recommended. B2 was approved as recommended. B3 was pulled by the applicant, and B4 was the opposite, or the alternate recommendation was moved and seconded to send it to or authorize it to go to the Agricultural Land Commission, and that was approved. So we're on C1. Go ahead.
Chair, I have B2 as being referred to the Area C APC.
Oh, yes, that's right. Good catch. B2 did go to the APC. That's where it went. So we're on C1, Solid Waste Management Plan, and the motion that's been put on the floor is that Director Gilbert would be the new chair and Director Roberts would be the alternate and vice chair as needed. And that the addition of the Public Advisory Committee members is outlined in the report would also be approved. So I was just about to call the question when we discovered you online folks weren't with us. So this is a corporate vote. So the question on C1, all those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. That brings us down to community services. Item D1, the application for a tire stewardship grant in Spirit Park, CAO.
Thank you. Purpose of this report is to secure provincial funding to construct a multi-use accessible pathway at Spirit Park in Naramata Electoral Area E. Staff recommendation is that the Board of Directors support the application to the Tire Stewardship of British Columbia grant for Spirit Park multi-pathway in Electoral Area E. Staff is here to answer any questions or concerns you may have.
Okay, I'll go to Director Federico.
I'll move the administrative recommendation.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on this? Again, this is a corporate vote. I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to Protective Services, the 2025 UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, CAO.
Thank you. To secure provincial funding for emergency support services for the region and enhance the capacity, resource, and cooperation of all ESS teams within the RDOS to respond to emergencies and disasters, with the administrative recommendation being that the Regional District of Okanagan-Similkameen submit a joint application under 2025 UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Fund Emergency Support Service Equipment and Training Grant for $280,000 and manage the grant on behalf of the District of Summerland, City of Penticton, Town of Osoyoos, Town of Princeton, Town of Oliver, and the Village of Karamias. It's not included in here, but this is great to see one region working together, and staff's here to answer your questions.
Okay, Director Coyne,
I'll move it.
moved, seconded. It's on the floor. Any discussion on this one? Seeing no hands, this one is again a corporate vote. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to finance, early budget approval, CAO.
And thank you. So the purpose of this is to increase organizational efficiency and anticipate that earlier bids will result in lower prices and enter delivery of vehicles. And the recommendation is that the early approval request as contained in February 6, 2025 report from the CEO be approved. I am asking for one exception. There is an early approval here for the library. I believe it's number 7 for CRF 119 Naramata Library that I'm requesting that be pulled as a early approval, but the rest maintain the same.
Okay, and that's at the request of the area director. So
That's correct.
Anybody prepared to move that? Moved, seconded? Any discussion on it? Making sure I'm not missing any hands online. Seeing no hands, we'll call the question. Again, corporate, all those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Legislative Services, a letter of support for the OBWB Water Conservation Grants, CAO.
Thank you. The OBWB requires that all water quality grant applications be accompanied by a letter of support from the organization's local government. And in this case here, we have been requested for a letter of support. So the recommended motion is that the regional district forward a letter of support for a wetland restoration project in Twin Lakes by the BC Wildlife Federation, the National Trust of BC, Lower Nippet Improvement District, and the Greater Twin Lakes Stewardship Society to the Okanagan Basin Water Board for the 2025 OBWB Water Conservation and Quality Improvement Grant Program.
Okay, Director Monteith, are you prepared to move that?
Yes, please, thanks.
Mover, a seconder, thank you. Any discussion on this one? Am I missing a hand? Oh, Director Coyne, go ahead. Coyne Senior.
Is there somebody that can give us, like, what are they gonna do with this money, or where it's gonna, just out of interest?
I think it had a brief outline on that, but CAO?
I can get the details from them and have it forwarded to all the council. Sorry, I'm still council, to all the board.
All the board. Director Monteith.
Thank you through the chair. So in the report under analysis, it talks about they're working towards restoring a natural wetlands that was on the property. So they brought together these partners and in collaboration, trying to work together to restore that wetlands. That's sort of the goal, as well as I believe there's some engineering stuff as part of the grant.
Okay. And any further details than that, the CAO will send that out to everybody. Any other questions or discussion? Again, corporate, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to over to CAO reports. Anything there, CAO?
Yes, thank you. Very quickly, you'll notice that there is now 3 chairs at the podium here. Going forward, anytime that there's a report from any of the 4 departments, the managing director is now going to be sitting with the staff so that they can fill in any questions and answers that the staff do not have. So that's new and that started today. Also, March 6th, the board's going to be receiving the strategic priorities for 25 and 26. And it's going to be in the form of a workshop and through the committee. So that's something that then the board can decide which recommendations. We are changing some of the projects from 25 to 26 because we are over capacity by 15,000 hours. And by not eliminating any projects, but just moving them from one year to another, we're able to do it over the 2-year period. The board ultimately has a final say. If board staff recommends that we move something in 26 and you want it 25, that will happen. However, then the board has to decide what to move from 25 to 26. So essentially, we call it, it's a strategic priority tracker, but it's actually a work plan, a detailed work plan other than the core work. Also, I will not be here on the next board meeting. The 27 regional district CAOs are having a conference, and I'll be part of it. I think it's something that I can bring back some benefits. You look at best practices, and I want to share our best practices because we now have some programs that I think are worth shareable. That's it.
Thank you for that. Question, Director Roberts?
Thank you through the chair. My question, and as we're looking at work plans moving forward, and we know that we live in uncertain times now, are things being looked at more through that lens too, in regards to the circumstances that are quite fluid in the world today, and especially in regards to how it's going to affect our citizens and costs and stuff. So again, and there's a balance between what we put off, what we put away, and also what we spend, because sometimes spending, saves you money in the long run. So are we looking at things through the eye of this new reality? Thank you.
CAO?
So this new plan that we'll be submitting is fluid in that it is full capacity for the staff. However, as a lot of times that you as directors, things come up that are now more priority that weren't there before, it would have to come to the board as a notice of motion to add something major material. And then the board will decide what, if they want to add it, and then the board will decide what to take off, because it is full capacity. There are some departments that are right now, we're going to have a plus or minus 2% variance. So I'm accepting a capacity over by 2%. And in some cases that we're talking like 1,000 hours at 2%. However, you have full ability to change the priorities during the year just because the economy is volatile and circumstances changes.
Okay, thanks for that. Next up is this, oh, sorry, Director Taylor.
Yeah, just one, can you just clarify the date when you're bringing this back to the board? And secondly, I just wondered if there was value in having an automatic place in the agenda where this could be raised. Otherwise, anytime a director wants to review this, or we as a board want to review this, it's going to take a few weeks to get it there. And I'm just wondering if that's appropriate, or if we want a way of just automatically regularizing that there's an opportunity to have this on the board agenda.
I'll go to the CAO.
So it's what the goal is, and it's not just a goal, it's mandatory. March 6th is the date that it's coming to the board. As far as having it, because this is something new, I do like it having something that's on the agenda on a regular basis. It doesn't have to have something on there, but that way it does eliminate the notice of motion and it speeds up the process. One thing I did forget to state is the board's going to receive 2 recommendations. One as if OK Falls is going to become as a voted yes, and one as a no. There's 4,700 hours in the work plan that's going to be taken up by staff if OK Falls becomes incorporated. And that's the amount of hours that we've estimated.
Okay. Director Monteith.
Thank you. Through the chair. Acknowledging that we're asking for more than we have capacity for, is there an opportunity to bring in contractors to do a little bit of this work and that we can keep our staff doing the core work that we would expect? I just see that there's a need. So if we keep pushing it off, there's other needs that keep creeping in and filling that spot. And we never seem to get anything accomplished.
CAO.
So the board's going to determine your priorities, what comes in 2025. As far as the contractor goes, there's still work involved that involves staff, regardless if it's a contractor or not. And then you've got the union issue. You cannot contract work that is a union work. And majority of this work is there are contracts already anticipated in the budget. And as you've seen, if you go through it, almost quarter of the lines have a budget, a contract component. So that's already there, and that takes time, and it's contract that we've already had, and the union agrees that is not a union position. But anything that is in the current work plan, if we contract it out, it would be a union position, and it's not feasible, and we're not following the union rules that we agreed to.
Yeah. So we do use contracts where we can, and we're limited on some of those.
Correct.
Okay, Silga, I'm assuming I'm going to be going to Ms. Cram on that, or is it the CAO?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay, we do have Southern Interior Local Government Association resolutions. My understanding is there's one on there at the moment, unless I misread that. And I think that was from Director Taylor. Maybe he can enlighten us as to the goal that he was shooting for there before we approve it going to Silga.
Yeah, it just seems to me that a lot of agricultural operations have incorporated a short-term rental component into their business plan. Some have got several. And what we've heard from Chris twice now is that although the province doesn't require that the principal residence requirement be adhered to on ag properties. The ALC actually has requirements that the owner live on the property. And I just think that's going to be kind of a non-starter in many cases. People have bought a second vineyard quarter mile away, 10 miles away. It's got a property, it's got a house on it. They're setting it up as a short-term rental, and they're going to run afoul of the ALC.
I think it was also now their rule that they would need a non-farm use in order to run that short-term rental on ag lands, but we'll see. CAO, would you recommend we wait for the 20th and with the, if there's any other resolutions, or should we deal with this one now?
I recommend that we wait because there's still an opportunity. Let's wait until the last minute. And there's some that I think can be staff-driven that we could recommend at that time.
Okay. And with this one specifically, will staff take a look at it and give us some suggestions or comments on it at that time?
Hold on, please.
Okay. Director Bush?
Yeah, so I agree with Director Taylor. We're having the same problem in Smokameen because the wineries are phoning me every day now and saying, look, we don't live next door to the winery, but we have a short-term rental there. So,
okay.
I mean, ALC allowed this to happen, and now they're going to take it away from them? Like, it doesn't make sense.
Changing the rules midstream, but Director Roberts?
Yeah, thank you. And that's also the blurred lines, what's agricultural stays versus, short-term rental, because there is some slight differences in that. So it's like, what are we talking about, apples and apples or apples and oranges, right?
Okay, CAO?
Hello?
There you are.
I just had to hit it harder. Technical difficulty. So Silga has recommended that we submit them as the board approves them. So you're not restricted just to today. So I do recommend that we review this again at the next meeting, but we can submit this if the board approves it.
Okay. So does someone want to move that we, go ahead, Director Coyne.
Yeah, I support this. I just think we need to wordsmith this a bit because I think it's kind of vague as what we're asking. We're just asking to remove the existing requirement, but I think we need to explain a little bit further as to what exactly we're in the actual ask.
Yeah, and put it in the proper format as the whereas, and therefore sort of stuff. Okay. So this will be coming back to us at the next board meeting. Moving down the agenda to Chair's report. Not a whole bunch to report this month, other than the Chairs and CAOs forum is coming up. It's usually in March, but it's been moved to April this year, and it's at the same time that the MFA is also held, or it's the day before or something. So when we attend that, or when I attend that, I get to go to both. Director's motions. Any director's motions today? Director Monteith.
Thank you. Through the chair, I was sort of disappointed that the motion that was on the last agenda didn't appear back this meeting, talk about the electoral area.
It's on the strategic plan, so we'll be discussing it then, and if it stays on the strategic plan, it will move ahead. But Director Federico?
Thank you. I'm in the same boat as Director Monteith. I was kind of disappointed it didn't show up, and I appreciate it's on the strategic plan. But by keeping it here as a specific director's motion just moves that along a little quicker and making it that kind of higher priority. So I'm also disappointed that it didn't come back this week.
Okay. Any director's motions? New director's motions? Not seeing any hands. That brings us down to the closed session. And that in accordance with section 91A, C, and J of the Community Charter, the board closed the meeting to the public on the basis of personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality, or another position appointed by the municipality, labor relations, or other employee relations, and information that is prohibited or information that if it were presented in a document would be prohibited from disclosure under Section 21 of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. So motion to go in camera, moved, seconded. Director
Can I
Laporta?
just say before we go into in camera, we've missed the board members' verbal update,
We'll
which was
get that.
after we do the in camera?
Yeah, maybe we should do that first, because most people will have vacated. So
Okay.
before I accept, good catch, before we go in, carry through with the motion to go in camera, any board members' verbal updates? Director McCordoff, I knew there was a reason you wanted to do that. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. So I just wanted to report on the fact that I have been on the Border Mayors Coalition. I've been at a couple of meetings on that one. My reason for being involved was I said that Highway 97 was a very important route, north-south route, and that the Suias border crossing was a really busy place, and that I was concerned about businesses that relied on that border crossing up and down, not just in Suias, but in the South Okanagan. And I have talked, Keith has done an article in the paper yesterday, which explains things quite well. However, I did point out to him that the picture that he has on there of me is over 10 years old, and I thought that maybe we could have an update. So I did talk to the Chamber of Commerce, the executive director, Denise Blaschko, South Okanagan one, and just to see how she felt about it. And she said that she certainly heard that there are businesses that are scared, that there are rapid changes and nobody knows what's happening next. And so her concern is that we need to get as much information as we can and you know, be ready to sort of deal with it and have a comfort level. So yesterday I was on the Mayor's Coalition, and there were probably 8 municipalities from British Columbia and probably 10 or 12 from Ontario, a couple from the eastern provinces, and also one from, I think it was Manitoba. So their concern is that we listen to one another, we work together, we try and be stronger together as a team, and that we try and be diplomatic. And I know sometimes that's difficult, but we have, we're quite concerned about the fact that the American anthem was booed in Eastern Canada, and then the Canadian anthem was booed down in the States. So we don't think that is the right way to manage. We need to work together and look at what we can do to try and make this sort of an easier transition. We know that things are going to change. We know that we're going to have, you know, lots of ups and downs on this, but I will continue to be on that committee, and I will report back whenever I have anything else. The meeting that I had last week, I did not speak. Most of the people on there were big cities. So this time, some of us smaller areas did report, and I said, here's my situation, and I'm in the South Okanagan, and I explained that we have regional districts in British Columbia, and that the RDOS was an important contact for all of us, and I would try and represent everybody. But if you have any questions about this or any concerns about it, please let me know. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks for that, Director McCordoff. I'm sure that's going to create some discussion. Go ahead, Director Holmes.
Thank you. Yeah, and speaking of Highway 97, last week, the mayor of Peachland and I met with the several opposition MLAs, including the Shadow Minister of Transportation, the Shadow Minister of Infrastructure, and I believe 4 or 5 Okanagan MLAs. And we met regarding specifically the slide and the various pinch points on the highway between Peachland and Summerland, of which there's many. There's often that highway is often closed between our two communities, and it was a really good discussion. It was mainly they were listening to us and mainly to get an understanding of the concerns in South Okanagan, and I think the takeaway was we impressed upon them the need for some sort of plan for alternate routes up in the southern part of the Okanagan here, like so, and so that was a good takeaway, and then they went off and visited the slide area, so that was a productive meeting.
Okay, thanks for the update. Any other verbal updates from people's communities? Director Taylor.
I'd just like to go back to Director McCordoff's update, and I'm just wondering if the RDOS shouldn't pass a motion acknowledging that Director McCordoff is representing our interests to the to the border cities committee. I just think we're into some volatile times here, and I think that Director McCordoff has got a window in on some of the discussions and lobby groups that we simply wouldn't have otherwise. And I think we should sort of formally acknowledge that she's our rep in there. She's not doing it voluntarily. She's formally representing us.
Not sure if that's needed or not, as this is...
I have had a resolution from council to Suez Town Council to recognize that I'm on there. I don't know whether this is necessary or not. I just wanted to make sure that we were one region working together. So that's why I will continue to fill you in on what's going on.
Okay, I'm going to ask the CAO his thoughts. Is that something we need, or is it...
I think it would be beneficial if it has the support of this board. So exactly what the director stated is, as the regional district Okanagan Similkameen considers one region working together, let the board appoint director to represent us in this area.
For the mayors or the border mayors, whatever it's called, council alliance. Okay. You're wanting to speak to it or move it? Okay, it's moved, seconded. Any discussion on it? Go ahead, Director Bloomfield.
Yeah, I think if Director McCordoff was to explain to the group the length of the border that the regional district has with the United States, it might be longer than most of the other people at that table. So it might add weight to your position. So don't think of yourself as a small municipality. Think of yourself as a part of a larger region.
Yeah, and there's actually 2 crossings in this area too, not just the one. So.
Yes. So can I just add that yesterday, the CAO and I had a meeting with the RCMP, and this topic came up. So I have talked to Superintendent McCandy and to Jason, and they are certainly aware of how to try and protect the border too, and we do a pretty good job in this area.
We do actually have the border RCMP based in Osuyas as well. So, Director Roberts.
Yeah, thank you, the chair. And I'm wondering whether or not there's time to speak, and especially from your position in regards to the water board, like the zebra mussels issues, those kinds of things. Does that, because we're dealing with border stuff, but we don't want to see these kinds of environmental impacts stop in regards to how we work together. That being said, at the same time, you look at the sterile insect release program, which a big part of its its function is that it sells to the, Washington and Oregon for the orchards down there. And it's what creates it and makes it viable for us. So
I'm sure if the opportunity arose, she would add that to it.
I'm also on the International Lake Kasui's Board of Control, which has people on both sides. And so, we'll look at it from that point of view. Okay, get me one.
All right, we've got the motion on the floor. I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. So we'll put a letter together. I'm not sure who it will go to, but we'll do something to that effect. Now we have the motion to go in camera moved and seconded. I'm going to call the question on that. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. I'll give Adam a moment to get us in camera and ask the CAO to let us know whom. Okay, thank you, Adam. I just got to find my. Okay, I do have a report out to do here that to go into open session, that the board approved the purchase of a 1-ton truck using reserve funds to support the emergency response operations for the RDOS, and that the vehicle be operational prior to the spring freshet of 2025 to ensure deployment capability of the critical emergency response trailers. So that was coming out of closed and into open. And with that, I would motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. So we'll jump straight into planning and development. I will turn it over to Director Wiebe.
Thank you, Chair. We'll call the meeting to order. It looks like 10:40. And ask for a motion to adopt the agenda. Motion, somebody seconded? Seconded. All those in favor? That carries. Thank you. Moving on to 2023 Regional Snapshot. CAO.
Thank you. So this is more of an information report. The purpose of this report is to provide an overview of the 2023 Regional Snapshot, which is related to the South Okanagan Sub-Regional Growth Strategy Bylaw, and that the administration recommendation is that the board receive the 2023 Regional Snapshot. Staff is here. Do you have with the presentation and answer your questions?
Mr. Garish.
Great, thank you. So before I turn this over, I just wanted to do a quick introduction for the board's benefit. For Shawani Marharjan, who's our student at the moment. Shawani is a master's student at UBC and has been helping us over the last few months prepare the snapshot. And she'll actually be with us till the end of April, so you might see her again. But with that, if she's online, I'll turn the presentation over to her. Okay. We had her online, I think, earlier in the morning.
What we can do, if it'd be helpful, is move on to other agenda items and give her an opportunity to do the tech part to figure out how to get her back, or?
Well, I was going to offer for the board in anticipation of potential technical issues, because it is for information. If we aren't able to bring her in, it would be a shame for her not to be able to present the work that she's been doing for the last few months. So if the board's open to deferring this item potentially to the next meeting, that might be.
Well, is it possible to get her back before the end of the meeting? I'm just looking at our tech. Because if we'll keep this on the agenda, and then if by the end of the meeting, we're not able to get the presentation today, then we can certainly bring this back to a later meeting. Is everyone not around? We're good with that? Okay, so then what we'll do, we'll just, so do I table B and move on to C? What's the proper procedure for that? Thank you.
You could rearrange the order of the agenda.
Do I need it? No, just do it. Okay, I'm just double checking.
Which would allow you to come back to that item later on in the meeting.
Okay. So we'll just table B momentarily. We'll move on to the Okanagan Basin Water Board Update Sewage Facilities Assistant Grants Terms of Reference 2024 CAO.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide the board with an overview of the Okanagan Basin Water Board Update Sewage Facility Assistant Grant Terms of Reference 2024 and ask for the clarification on section 4.6.2 on the Sewage Facility Assistant Grant Terms of Reference 2024. And the administrative recommendation is that the Okanagan Basin Water Board be requested to clarify section 4.6.2 of its Sewage Facility Assistant Grant Terms of Reference 2024, and the requirement that the bylaw be in place prohibiting the development of accessory buildings on properties less than 1 hectare in area that are not connected to sewer systems operated by the Regional District of Okanagan, Similkameen. Staff is here, and I see a PowerPoint presentation available.
Mr. Garish, please.
Great, thank you. I'll just yes. Yes. Great. Thanks, Adam. All right. So the point of the presentation is primarily just to give the board an overview of some of the changes that the OBWB's brought in relation to their assistance grant funding for sewer systems, but also, as the CAO indicated, to get direction to ask the OBWB to clarify one of the new regulations that they've introduced. So I'll start my presentation with some quick background. I know this has been an ongoing issue with the board for the last couple of years, but just as a refresher, a reminder of how we came to the current state of having our bylaws reflect a 1 hectare policy in relation to accessory dwellings and subdivisions and community sewer systems. And it's my recollection that it dates back to the Northwest Sewer Extension on the Soyuz Lake, and seeking senior level government funding for that project. And one of the requirements that the province indicated to the RDOS at that time was a need to implement the so-called quote-unquote 1 hectare policy. And at that time, it was tied only to subdivisions, and basically required that any new parcel to be created, if it was to be on septic, had to be had to be more than 1 hectare in area, and if you wanted to go less, you had to connect to a community sewer system. And so the RDOS amended its OCP and zoning and subdivision servicing bylaws between 2007 and 2008 in order to give effect to that, in order to qualify for grant funding. Fast forward about 7 years later, OBWB reinterprets the policy and expands it from subdivision to include accessory dwellings, and is advising that if local governments wish to continue to qualify for the sewer facility grant program funding, that they would have to amend their bylaws to exclude accessory dwellings on parcels less than 1 hectare that are serviced by septic, which the RDOS subsequently did. Again, another 9 years later, the board, concerned about housing affordability, and I think this is tied back also to the housing options that we put to you in February of 2023, SILGA resolution asking the province to provide some flexibility in relation to the 1 hectare policy to allow for additional housing where suitable septic systems exist, and so not necessarily having to have a community sewer system in place. A couple months later, OBWB announces their review of their sewer facilities grant funding program, going to be seeking provincial input, also asked for local government input. The board responded a couple months later, and it was asked, or the OBWB was asked to reconsider its approach to accessory dwellings, again in light of the housing crisis and affordability issues. Almost a year later, OBWB releases their draft guidelines seeking input. Those guidelines did not reflect the board's request from June 2023. May 2024, the board responds to the draft facilities assistant criteria. And again, at that time, we flagged a concern about the OBWB's move towards mandating that only private systems run by the local government could be considered for subdivision and accessory dwellings. June, the OBWB releases their final version of the facilities assistance. Again, they disregarded the direction, or not the direction, but the request from the RDOS, and they mandated that qualification was going to be dependent on prohibiting subdivision and accessory dwellings on private systems not run by the local government. My understanding is this caused some concern north end of the valley. So in September, OBWB revisited their assistance grant criteria and made a carve out for subdivisions. So private systems, not locally government owned ones, could continue to allow subdivision to occur. But they did retain the prohibition on accessory dwellings, which is the nature of the request for direction we have before you today. Before I get to that, though, just for the board's benefit, in case you didn't get a chance to read the whole of the grants assistance documentation, this particular slide deals with the subdivision component of it. And so you can see here that they are saying that we should have policies or regulations in place mandating sewer systems be run by the municipality or the regional district. But in response to some of the pushback from up north, they did create that carve out, which is the second dot point, saying that as long as a private system is being run in accordance with provincial regulations, that will not affect the local government's eligibility for SFA grants. So that was beneficial. In terms of accessory dwellings, however, they did not make a similar allowance. And so that's the nature of the request before you today, to ask OBWB to clarify if that was an oversight or if that was done on purpose. If it was done on purpose and it stands, then we're looking at potentially having to make amendments to the zoning bylaw for places such as Gallagher Lake, Apex, and I believe parts of Naramata that are on private systems to prohibit accessory dwellings on those systems if the parcels are less than 1 hectare in area. OBWB is also asking for more specific language in relation to decommissioning septic systems once a parcel connects to a sewer system. So we've looked at the bylaw and it looks like there might be a need to amend the applicable bylaw here just to ensure that we have consistent wording. And I also want to flag this for the board's benefit too, because I think it is new and it's reporting requirements in relation to 1 hectare compliance. And so OBWB is now looking for annual updates on basically what we've been up to over the course of the previous 12 months. And copies of any amendment bylaws or permits that have been issued or approved by the board that contravene the 1 hectare policy. And they've also notified that the penalty for those situations will be suspension for a minimum of a year of any grant funding assistance, or until the community can confirm compliance. And where that information is not provided, all grant payments will be paused to that community. So some consequences now in relation to 1 hectare and OBWB. So that's a very, I apologize, very quick summary of the assistance grant funding criteria, but just to wrap it up, so reiterating what the CAO said, we are hopeful that the OBWB can clarify their position in relation to accessory dwellings and private systems, because that will require amendment to the bylaws if the position currently stands as written. And I'm happy to try to answer any questions that the board might have.
Director Federico?
Yes, thank you, the chair. So the province in the small scale multi-unit housing has this mandate that we're supposed to have more housing. And then we're limited by the 1 hectare rule in the OBWB that we can't have more housing. And then it's, well, then you can go to a local government owned system, but then we have our ratepayers who are like, no, we don't want this because we don't want our rates to increase and we don't want this infrastructure. So we're in this kind of chicken egg situation in terms of the province kind of limiting us in 2 separate ways to be able to expand. So how do we satisfy the small scale multi-unit housing while then also respecting the limitations being put on by the OBWB if there's no give and take on either side?
Mr. Garrish?
So the quick response to that would be the province, I suppose, is okay with secondary suites being the additional dwelling unit to achieve small scale multi-unit housing compliance. That's the second dwelling unit. It can be connected to a septic system, but at a staff level, the issue we've always had with that is what's the difference between that dwelling unit being within the footprint of the principal house versus being detached, as long as it's tied into the existing septic serving the principal dwelling. And we've discussed that with OBWB staff on multiple occasions, but they see it differently than we do. And so this is the regulation. So we can allow suites to ensure SSMUH compliance, but if it's septic and a detached accessory dwelling, we can't at the moment. But the bigger issue is now that they're saying it has to be an LG, local government run system. It can't be a private one.
I believe Director Barkle, you had a
Yeah,
question?
there's further hypocrisy or conflict in this rule too, in that a septic system is designed for a house as it was built, and most cases not contemplating a secondary suite. So a secondary suite increases the load and changes all the specifications for your sewer system and or septic system, and so are they even, so if you're going to theoretically they expand their septic system, which is possible, but I'm sure it doesn't happen, and expanding your septic system is hardly different than adding a new one for your secondary dwelling. So further clarification is required there.
Any response, Mr. Garish? Or I think that was self-evident comment. Any further? I think looks like we're probably all in support of. Oh, go ahead, Director Holmes.
Just could you get a copy of the slides? Thanks.
Oh, yeah. Chair Pettigrew, you'll move as recommended? And anyone, Director Roberts seconded? Any further comments, questions? Looks like everybody's in, I don't see anybody. And anyone online? No. I will call the question. All those in favor? And any opposed? I don't see any. So that motion passes. Moving on. Well, let me just clarify. The presenter for section B, do we have them online now, or has that changed? Not yet? Okay, so I'll carry on with D, and then before the end of Mr. Garish.
Well, I was just going to ask Adam, I thought when we were presenting, I saw her name pop up on the screen. Oh, okay, she's gone again.
Okay, so we'll keep trying, and we'll move on to D. The regulating private utilities for information, CAO.
As stated, Chair, this is for information, and the purpose of this report is to provide an overview of proposed amendments to the regional district's official community plan, zoning and subdivision and development servicing bylaw related to the regulation of private water and sewer utilities. Staff is here to answer questions, and is there a PowerPoint presentation?
Then Mr. Garish, if you would proceed, please.
Sure, thank you. I'll just wait for the presentation to come up. Great, thanks, Adam. So I know this has been before the committee multiple times over the last couple of years, but it has been a bit of a lag since the last time it was considered by the board. So I'm just going to go back through some of the basic background again, just for the board's benefit. So staff understanding that the request that led to the proposed amendments that are before you today originally came out of the sewer referendum in Caledon, which had proposed at that time to extend a line from the OK Falls plant up along the side of Skaha Lake to service parcels in, I guess, what could be considered the lower Caledon area. And that went to referendum in 2021 and was defeated. And as a result of that, shortly after that referendum was defeated, we started to receive referrals from the Ministry of Transportation in relation to various strata lot subdivisions that were proposing the creation of their own individual private sewer systems in order to facilitate development that we presume the owners had been waiting for the sewer line from OK Falls to service, but in recognition of the referendum outcome, they were now pursuing their own private options in order to facilitate those subdivisions. And as we discussed in the previous item on your agenda today, comply with the 1 hectare policy for new parcels less than 1 hectare. So this became an issue in electoral area I, and there was resolutions put forward by the APC for that electoral area asking the board to undertake a review of its land use bylaws in order to try to address the concerns around the proliferation of these small private systems that were being proposed to support the strata subdivisions. And that resolution from the APC was considered by the board in May of 2022. At that time, the points that we put to the board was that there was no specific Bearland strata bylaw to review as had been requested by the bylaw, but staff felt that I think what the APC was getting at was actually more appropriately termed a zone review to look at minimum parcel sizes and servicing requirements. But if there was a desire by the board to do such a review, we would also look at other options as well, such as our ability to, and I know the wording here says prohibit, but which I'll get to in a minute, I guess the more accurate word might have been regulate private utilities, and that at the end of the day, a Clean Zone review be considered as a strategic project in 2023. Yeah, and again, I know we just touched on this in the previous presentation from the last agenda item, but just wanted to reiterate that this is all tied up into 1 hectare policy. And as we had just discussed, a preference by OBWB to have local governments curb the ongoing development of private systems within the valley and look at maybe having these fall under local government administration and operation. And as the board's also aware, based on multiple different situations that have come up over the last 10 to 15 years, you are asked on a regular basis to consider taking over some of these private systems, whether it is sewer or water, particularly, down the road after they've been in operation for many years and either haven't been properly maintained or kept up, or it's just simply that there's no longer resources available for the private operator to continue operating them. And, the costs and the discussion with the board about taking those on. So in terms of regulatory bylaws and other bylaws that we have in place currently, and again, just a refresher for the board, so the regional growth strategy already does speak to encouraging publicly owned and operated utilities within the south end of the valley. And the electoral area OCP bylaws support that by seeking to discourage the development of private systems in relation to water and sewer. Where there's a bit of a gap, though, currently is in relation to the zoning bylaw. So despite having the policy documents that speak to prohibiting or not encouraging private systems, there is no corresponding regulation in the zoning bylaw at this point. And similarly, the subdivision servicing bylaw, while it does speak to defining what a community sewer system is, it does consider those at the moment to also include strata corporations or systems run and owned by an incorporated company. So arguably not quite the same consistency at a regulatory level as opposed to the policy approach, which is not to encourage private systems. As the board's also aware, there's your existing sewer utility acquisition policy, and it generally speaks to a specific policy preference, which is that these systems be owned and operated by the local government, just because this is seen to be in the interests of residents. So summarizing, staff do feel that there's a strong rationale for the board to regulate in favor of publicly operated utility systems. In order to do so, and we'll touch on this in subsequent slides, principal changes that are being outlined are to the definitions of community water and community sewer, and that would be in the zoning bylaw and the subdivision servicing bylaw. If the board takes this approach, we feel that this would address the concerns that originally led to the initiation of the Clean Zone review, and that such a review may no longer be necessary. And we also feel that the merits of this approach warrant it being applied or at least considered at a regional level. So there are issues that we want to flag again just for the board's consideration. Obviously, there's going to be proposals to create new private utilities in future or to expand existing ones. And those would come before the board, and we feel that those could be dealt with through a DVP as opposed to a rezoning process. This may result in pressure on the RD to assume ownership of these new systems in order to facilitate development, but ultimately that would be a decision of the boards. And considerations obviously would include financial resources required, staffing resources, consistency with the existing OCPs and other land use bylaws, and acquisition of new systems. It's not contemplated in the draft amendments that we're proposing to the land use bylaws, but I would just reemphasize that those are contemplated within the board's existing acquisition policy. So there is direction provided that way. And then again, I mean, these are some examples we've used in previous PowerPoint slides to the board, but just some examples that we're aware of where we have undeveloped zoned or undeveloped land with zoning that allows for multiple or multi-use, multi-density residential development that's going to require some form of private system, or sorry, some form of sewer system, whether that's to be private or public, will ultimately be a decision of the board if the regulations as proposed are enacted. And this is just another example from outside of OK Falls, actually in electoral area I. So the options before the board, and I'll touch on these in subsequent slides as well. So introduce the regulations as proposed, abandon the amendment bylaws, but in doing so, we feel that that would require amendments to the RDS and OCPs because they do speak to having regulations that restrict private utilities. And then there's the status quo. So the proposed OCP amendments, which would allow for the regulation, so again, just policy statements, I won't spend too much time on these because you've seen them before. The proposed zoning amendments would just basically be looking at changing the definitions to exclude privately operated systems as being compliant as a community water or sewer system, and similar definition changes to the subdivision servicing bylaw. Proposed procedure bylaw amendments, so this would basically address situations where somebody wants to come forward seeking a DVP and setting out the type of information that we would require in order to make an informed recommendation to the board as to whether it's feasible or suitable to allow for a DVP to be granted, or if it's a situation where the board might want to consider requiring that this system be turned over to local government to operate and administer going forward. Again, I can circulate the slides deck after the presentation today, so I won't go into too much detail here, but basically this just sets out some of the basic information we would need to make that kind of a recommendation to the board. So alternative number one to the administrative recommendation would be to abandon the bylaws. And as I indicated with the previous slide, while that's certainly an option to the board, we feel that abandoning it should be done in accordance with changes to the RGS and the OCPs to remove a policy statement that says the board is actually in favor of restricting private systems if that's no longer the case. And then option two would be the status quo and nothing actually changes. From a staff's perspective, this is not a preferred approach because if we retain the existing policy statements that suggest that we don't favor private utilities, then we should have regulations that back that up. But if we don't want those regulations, then it creates a bit of a conflict, I think. And so project status, so as you can see here, this has been going on for a number of years now. And the last time it was before you was at P&D in August. And discussion of it was deferred at that time in order that staff could be made available, I think, to answer questions. And so Alan and I are here today, and we're hopeful that we're able to answer any questions that you have. So I'm just going through your resolutions. And that's it for my presentation. So if there are questions, we'll try our best.
Okay, so Director Bloomfield, and then I have Gilbert and Roberts.
Thank you. And it appears to me that the problems that we've had with, especially with sewer systems, but water systems as well, as ones that are, well, the sewer systems are ones where they are owned by an incorporation, an incorporated company. And they seem to have caused us the most problems and the most time spent by this board over the past few years. But I'm just wondering if we put strata-owned sewer systems into the same boat as private systems, are we doing something that is, we're putting two different types of ownership into the same boat. And if we look at strata-owned sewer systems or septic systems, and let's say somebody, somebody wants to build a duplex, and we've got people that want to build duplexes on where there was a single-family home, and but then they're not allowed to because they can't have a sewer system or a septic system that is owned by the, or a shared septic system, for that duplex, which may be a strata, maybe a two-unit strata. And are we sort of shooting ourselves in the foot for encouraging growth under our requirements, provincial requirements for increased housing. And, you know, we were trying to stop privately owned sewer systems or septic systems, rightfully so, in my opinion, on the large scale ones, but is stopping the strata systems. Are we kind of shooting ourselves in the foot for small scale infill redevelopment?
Mr. Gersh?
I apologize if I answer generally. I'm not sure if we're shooting ourselves in the foot per se. And again, thinking back to the previous discussion that we had in relation to OBW being 1 hectare and accessory dwellings, for small-scale multi-unit housing, we're generally compliant on the basis that suites can occur and suites don't require strata systems. And I would like to think that ideally, if there are zones out there, putting aside the ones that I just highlighted that we know are undeveloped and are not connected to any community sewer systems or water systems, that where there's existing zoning that allows for duplexes or threeplexes or fourplexes or even higher density, that ideally that's in existing growth areas where we do have servicing, such as at Apex, despite it being a private system. OK Falls, where we do own the systems, et cetera. But in relation to the strata question, I mean, from staff's perspective, how we understood this project to come onto our list of items to deal with was in relation to the strata proposals in Kalita. We were specifically asked to look at regulations in relation to regulating strata systems. So that was our starting point. And we did do research on that, and it came back that, yes, we could regulate them. I mean, ultimately, I think it's a question for the board as to whether you want to extend it that far or not. But from our perspective, it is something that you can do.
Director Gilbert, please.
Thanks, through the chair. And through that regulation, like how much, you know, regulation can happen after the system's put in place? Like we could do our best to ensure that the regulation is adhered to when it's placed in. But how do we ensure that the continual that regulation and the system is in the future is being maintained up to a level that is to the quality that we want as RDOS? Because I think the way I kind of look at this, if there's a private system that comes in, it would be nice to, or you know, however it goes, that at one point if we take it over or it hooks up to our system, we're making sure that it's regulated over its life before it comes back to us.
Mr. Gersh?
So these are the kind of questions that we envision occurring when applications come in asking, like, of course, sorry, I should have started this by saying, assuming that the regulations are put in place and we regulate and prohibit private utilities. As we've said to the board on previous occasions with land use bylaws, particularly zoning, nothing is ever really truly prohibited because, of course, under the Act, property owners always have the right to come to you as a board and submit an application and ask you to set aside that regulation in the context of their particular property. So even though we purport to regulate or prohibit private utilities, a property owner can come forward with the application and ask you to put that aside. And what we envision at a staff level is that we would ask basic questions about the nature of the system that they're proposing. And as part of our assessment to you as a board in considering that variance request is I suspect a recommendation as to whether this is feasible as a private system or should it be maintained as something operated and owned by the regional district. And if the board comes to the conclusion that they feel this particular system is suitable as a private one with no further participation from the regional district, then we would let it go. There would be probably no further oversight or control of it. But if you did have concerns about that system, you would either be, I presume, looking at preventing it from ever being created in the first place, or request or require that it be turned over to the RD to own and operate going forward. I'm not sure if there's any
follow-up.
Yeah, thanks through the chair, and thanks for that clarification. So I guess like if we were to say we regulate it, is that kind of just kind of making sure that we follow, you know, the small scale, you know, housing too with it. You know, does that give us like the opportunity within that to say, yeah, you can build it, but we're going to take the system, and then there's that negotiation with the developer that they would put the system in under the requirements of RDOS and we would take it on, that they would cover those costs.
Yes, and there's actually an example that I can reference where we've had those discussions at Twin Lakes, where there was zoning that allowed at one point up to 300 units. And in discussions with the property owner and recognizing that Twin Lakes might be a little different because of the water concerns that have existed up there historically, the developer, in order to undertake phase one of their residential development, would construct the water and sewer system. And as soon as it was constructed, turn it over to the regional district as our asset, and we would operate and maintain it going forward. So that there are historical examples of where that's happened, and we envision that's a possibility that could occur in future if the board was comfortable or required that that system being proposed be turned over to the LG, or to the RD, sorry.
Just so I know, I see Director Coyne's there. I have Roberts, Monteith, Coyne, and Federico. So I haven't forgotten anybody, but I'll try to keep the list that I have written down. So Director Roberts, please.
Thank you through the chair. As I've stated before, I'm quite concerned in regards to overreach, and as you've stated with issues, the ability for the regional district down the line in regards to staffing and the incurring and becoming a utility operator. I see there's kind of like two issues. Like we have the problem with lack of oversight at the provincial end, where we end up with these wrecked systems. Like I look at Area G, I have two small governance bodies, like an improvement district and an irrigation district. One's got some issues that they're struggling with, and another one that isn't. And then on top of that, I probably have greater than 8 different private water systems and sewer systems that I certainly wouldn't want to be responsible for in regards to mobile home parks and other things that are stretched over a wide area. I don't think I could hook Olalla up to Karamias' sewer system. So I get concerned with the wording in regards to prohibitions and that. I'd like to see us being able to force the provincial government or be given the authority to be able to oversee a lot of these things to make sure that these utilities that are privately owned don't end up broken and then we have to deal with it, and then the ratepayer gets stuck with the bill. My fear is, again, when we do things, and as we know as local government, when we actually take on something, it does cost a lot more money. Sometimes privately, it can be done at a more cost efficiently as long as it meets regulation and as long as it's being overseen. So, I still have concerns about the sense of overreaching and end up where we become operating all these utilities, and whether or not we will have that ability to manage that many, and whether or not the local ratepayer as a whole can afford it, because it's also going to be administrative costs that we all bear, even though the ratepayer gets it, but it's also general government. So that's my my concerns. Thank you.
Any response?
Chair, to answer the director's question, certainly it's not ideal to own a number of these small systems, but ultimately we're here to serve the public, and it's certainly in the public's best interest that the local government, the RDOS, owns and operates these systems. And I don't want to confuse the discussion today with the acquisition policy. So the utility acquisition policy is on the strategic priorities to update this year. And so that's where we'll update that to look at the systems that come to us with a request to take them over. The difference, certainly again, challenging with owning a lot of small systems, but the difference is we would be owning these systems from the beginning. So we can then plan rates accordingly to ensure appropriate operating fees, and also to ensure that we're putting away reserves for capital upgrades in the future, so that these property owners don't face the situation that we're seeing today, where we have to spend tens of millions and they have to pay for it all at the current now, because they essentially haven't been putting away money for the past number of years in an appropriate manner. So if we take that infrastructure on from the beginning, it's much easier for us to plan, staff up, and put in the appropriate rates upfront so that we don't perpetuate the current challenges.
Follow up?
Thanks. And I do appreciate that. I guess there's maybe a principle that's, slightly different, because I look at it as private ownership versus public ownership, and the ability to have the rights and responsibilities and be held accountable for your decisions that you make. And for us to absorb that responsibility and take it on collectively versus holding the individual companies and or other agencies responsible. Again, I see the rules and regulations and things that we have at the provincial level, and any of the issues that I've seen, which have been very few in my area, other than a couple, is that there hasn't been the oversight from the level of government when the community or ratepayers have voiced their concern and they haven't been supported. So I do see two different things, and then I just think that I have my own idea in regards to private land ownership versus public. So thank you.
Director Monteith, please.
Thank you, through the chair. So I'd like to make the administrative recommendation, if I can get somebody to support me. Yep, the first one. And then I want to speak to it. So the administrative recommendation is to move forward with the changes recommended by staff.
Well, option one?
Well, the one that's recommended by staff, not the option one.
It's not in our notes, it's in the slide. Maybe if we can just.
We'd have to come.
Well, that's, but this is, so I'm just clarifying with CAO and Ms. Cram.
Chair, currently this report is for a recommendation, but certainly the board, for information only, but if the board wants to accept one of the recommendations, that's acceptable too.
So the other question has been is that it doesn't look like in our emails and or in our package that we have those recommendations accessible to us other than in the slide. Is that correct?
That's correct, but there is, the recommendation, I believe, is on the slide, so we can bring that up so that the board can look at it. Can you just bring it up?
Yeah, sorry, my apologies, because as I recall, this was up for first reading in July and the board deferred to committee, and it was in committee in August, and that committee deferred again to today, so here we are. And I'm putting the slide deck together. I might have, and I apologize to the board for this, I might have used the one that we had for first reading. Sorry, I'm all over the place here. Yeah, so these were alternatives, but I believe it stems back to the recommendation that was at first reading in July to give the proposed amendments first reading, and that was deferred. Sorry.
At this point, I'm going to defer to staff to know how to proceed, because as this isn't an official, like it's a committee meeting, we technically don't have to have a motion to approve something that isn't in the agenda, but technically, that's what we're proposing, so I'm just not sure what the proper procedure is now.
So Chair, you're right, this is a committee, so
Right.
what I would recommend is that staff be directed to bring this back at the next board meeting with the recommendation that the board could consider.
So then would it be appropriate, if we could do that, would it be appropriate to then let those that are still on my talk list that haven't had a chance to speak, we already made a list that they could have an opportunity to speak, but they haven't had an opportunity yet.
Yeah.
So how do
Yes,
we,
just- Julian?
if we're comfortable bringing that at the next meeting, we'll
Yes.
bring a recommended,
With
or
the correct.
recommended motion, but that I can allow my speakers that are on the list to continue
Yes.
to speak to that
Yes.
before that recommendation is brought.
Yes.
We're good with that? Okay, just to make sure. So I'll continue then, because you were going to speak to it, right? Okay, so continue, please, Ms. Director Monteith.
Thank you, through the chair. I appreciate staff bringing this forward. Caledon we've been waiting for this. Staff are waving the white flag and saying, hey, something's coming down the pipe with development. This is a way to protect our community. The strata developments are proposed right along the waterfront, which is gonna eventually leak into the lake, causing problems down the road. So we know this is coming, so this is getting ahead of the problem for us. So I really appreciate the hard work that's gone into this, and I know the community has supported it, the APC, lots of conversations, so I'm really comfortable moving forward.
Thank you for that. Director Bob Coyne, your hand's been up for a very long time, but I didn't forget you.
It's good that it's taken a long time because I'm totally confused with what we were talking about here today. I've got mixed up between the OBWB change in heart that now they are accepting the sewer package plants for the private systems. Is that right, Chris? That's what's happened?
Oh, sorry, Mr. Karrasch.
Sure. So just recapping what was the previous agenda item. So OBWB came down with their sewer assistance grant funding criteria, and it initially said that subdivision and accessory dwellings on parcels less than 1 hectare could not occur if there was no community sewer system. But then they took it a step further and said that if there was a community sewer system, it had to be a local government one. It couldn't be private. OBWB changed their position on that in relation to subdivision, apparently not in relation to accessory dwellings. So we want to ask them for clarification on that. Was that an oversight or was that done on purpose? Because if it was purposefully done, we have to make some amendments to our zoning bylaws to reflect that to continue to qualify. The discussion now is recognizing that we have policy documents that speak to not encouraging private systems, but we don't have regulations to support that. We're recommending that the board take the next step and introduce regulations to support that, but recognizing that there are avenues in which property owners can come before you to seek an exception to that, and that you would be asked to consider that. And as part of that consideration, we would bring information to you outlining resource costs, financial as well as staff, consistency with plans, et cetera, and that the board can make a decision as to whether it wanted a private system to be created going forward, or if that system should not be created or created and turned over to the RD to own and operate.
Go ahead, Director Coyne. Follow up.
So those rules, like with the OBWB accepting privately owned and operated systems now are, correct me when I'm wrong here, because I know I'm mixed up, is when we go to create our own rules, are we still saying that people are going to have to turn it over to the regional district at the end of the day? Or are we just saying that we're going to now allow systems to be privately owned?
Mr. Karrasch?
I think what the proposed amendments are doing is giving the board the opportunity to make a decision at the front end before the system is created as to what form it's going to take. Is it going to be private? Is it going to even be constructed, or is it going to be constructed and turned over to the RD? That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on, Director Federico, please.
Yes, thank you to the chair. So I just want to lead off that I'm kind of disheartened that our manager of infrastructure is not sitting in the room to be here for this discussion, as this is very important to that department, as once it moves past bylaw, then it moves into that department. So I would like for their input to be here and at the table when we have these discussions. So with that, I'm not in favor of going this route. And so is this something that can live within our liquid waste management plans and something that can be monitored there? Like, I don't have a sewer service establishment bylaw. I have no way to even take on these systems with any kind of funding. And so then as small private systems come on board, are they each going to have their own sewer establishment bylaw to be able to pay for it? And then I get that it's user pay. So how is like those smaller details going to formulate for us to be able to make these decisions? Because right now, Area E doesn't have a broader community sewer, so I don't have anything to even grab from in an establishment bylaw to even move forward with this. So I prefer that this lives in our liquid waste management plan that we're currently working on, but if staff could speak to that, that would be wonderful.
Okay, well, I'll refer to staff because I'm not sure which one at the table wants to speak to it, or CEO.
If I may first, Mr. Fillion is the managing director of the Infrastructure Development Program. He represents the water, sewer, planning, and bylaw. And so he is here to speak on their behalf. Ultimately, he is the one responsible for that whole area.
Thank you. So to staff, please.
Sure, I'll start, and I think there was a lot of questions there. So if I miss any, let me know. But I mean, the way we see it at staff level playing out is that the questions that you raised in relation to feasibility and service establishment bylaws, that would be part of the discussion that we would present to the board as part of any DVP application. And so the information we'll be presenting to you is like basically around the feasibility of these systems. And so if it is a small system and it's being proposed to accommodate maybe 20 parcels, it might be that the conclusion is that that's not a viable system and that the recommendation would be not to allow it to go forward. But if the board took the position that it was viable and it was going to proceed as an RD system, then yes, there would be a service establishment bylaw having to be created for that. And part of the discussion before that would happen would be the rates. Like we would try to get as much information to you as we could in relation to the costs, financial, staff, et cetera, for that system so that you could make an informed decision. I'm not sure if there's anything from your end.
Chair, just further to Mr. Savino's comments, Ms. Bloomfield and myself have had discussions on this topic, and we're in agreement that discouraging private utilities is the responsible approach for the public. Again, I would just reiterate, yes, a number of small systems, but again, we're taking them on as new systems, and we can form the service areas and set the appropriate rates and make sure the appropriate reserves are being put away, and that ultimately the asset and the utility is being managed appropriately.
Okay, follow up and then.
Yes, follow-up, sorry. So just in terms of the liquid waste management plan, is this something that can live in that document opposed to in a land use bylaw?
Staff.
So I've always understood liquid waste management plans to be a roadmap to do other things. And so I'm not sure how it could reside in there. I suspect a liquid waste management plan would simply be making recommendations on further amendments or changes in order to give effect to that prohibition, which would probably lead us right back to the zoning and subdivision servicing bylaw amendments that are before you today. But, I mean, that's my understanding of a liquid waste management plan. I'm not sure if you've had a different experience.
Gonna move on to Director Taylor.
I'm supportive of the direction we're taking here, or staff are recommending. I'm a little confused in terms of how does it work with a strata or a mobile home park proposed? Like, would we own the collection system within the park or within the strata? Which is what I hear you suggesting might be the case, and I just am a bit baffled on how that could occur.
Turn it over to staff to decide which one of you wants to respond.
Chair, if it helps, think of it as a typical subdivision now. So when a subdivision happens now that isn't a strata, the developer constructs all the infrastructure under our bylaws and with our oversight. And then when the project's complete, we take over that infrastructure ultimately. This would be the same scenario. So whether it's a mobile home park or albeit what type of development, it would be the same approach whereby at the end of the day, we are owning that infrastructure, except for, of course, the ones where we approve a variance.
Follow up?
Oh, sorry, follow up, Director Taylor.
So just to clarify then, on sewer, we would own, if we could potentially approve a strata, where we own the pipe inside the property line.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Chair, to answer the question, that is correct. And that certainly has happened in many scenarios, maybe not in the RDOS, but in my experience, absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
So I have a list, but was it a question pertaining to the specific? Okay. So I'll allow an alternate follow-up.
Why would you want that?
Staff?
Chair, to answer the director's question, again, it can certainly be challenging for us to own a number of smaller systems, but ultimately, we're here in the best interest of the public, and especially when we're talking about essential services like water and sewer. And the responsible approach, again, is for the local government to own those utilities. And again, they'd be coming to us in the beginning when they're brand new, and then we could plan and operate accordingly and appropriately. I appreciate that it's a bit of a daunting thought to get your head around. There can be so many of these small systems, but again, ultimately, we're trying to not perpetuate the current scenario where these systems go private and then they come to us 20, 30 years down the road and not in good shape and in bad condition.
Well, so let me just look at the group. We know that this is coming back. We had scheduled to have the protection committee start at 11. It's now 11:35. So I can continue to keep to the list. I only have a couple more that are here to speak, but I'm wondering if, well, and actually we still had the presenter from B. So if the group is comfortable, I would like to suggest that perhaps we revisit it. Well, that's where I'm asking, because, yeah, you're on the list, but I'm just wondering. CAO?
We do have the delegation for the next waiting here, and it is coming back to the committee to the board as a recommendation. And that will be the best time to answer more questions.
So if I get a general nod, I don't need a general nod that we can, this is going to be coming back, we'll cease the speakers list. I know Director Barkwell, you were there, I hadn't spoke yet. And then I have a follow-up question, because we do have a delegation waiting. We also had a presentation that was the presenter now, I don't know, is presenters there? So do we want to postpone? Go ahead.
If I make a recommendation, is have delegation do the report, and then if the individual is still online, we can bring her back if these questions are completed for now.
So then we just want to recess? No, we don't, because we didn't get that far. They were gonna come with a recommendation for a motion next meeting, unless I'm mistaken, but I believe that's where we left it.
That's correct.
Okay. So do I need a motion to recess?
Just call for recess.
We'll just recess at 11:40.
Okay, and then we'll move straight into Protective Services and Director Roberts. Go ahead. That's for you.
Thank you. So we'll call the Protective Services Committee to order at 11:38. Could I have a motion to accept the agenda? Usually loud. So starting at 11:38, the Protective Services Committee, can I have a motion? I'd accept that. Everybody in favor? All right, anybody against? Nope, okay. So now I'd just like to move this over to, I guess we have a delegation. Should I go to the delegation directly or to the CAO? Okay, so to the delegation of Firewise Consulting.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much. It was a fascinating conversation, having flashbacks to my government experience in Alberta, talking about private sewer systems and the challenges that they come with. Thank you very much for the for the opportunity to work on this project with your staff and and Chief Bosha and his firefighters and all of that. It's been a truly remarkable and interesting project to be a part of, and I look forward to sharing that with you, or some portions of that with you, and in the next few minutes. We are not going on a deep dive into the report. I can go on for hours. That's not necessarily in any of our best interest. There is an extensive amount of background material that's in the report that is informative, and if you've got any questions, likely answers many of them. Do we have the presentation up? Here we go. We can go to the next slide, please. So just as a quick background piece, we got brought in, Firewise got brought in to take a look at the feasibility of establishing, of dealing with your existing fire hall in Keremeos. There are several, 2.5 for sure, reports and studies on the fire station that point to a whole bunch of shortfalls. It was never built as a fire station. It was converted from a previous occupancy, as many fire halls in central BC are. It's got some site placement issues at the bottom of the hill on that chicane curve at the bottom. It's in the floodplain in that river valley. Traffic concerns, extensive non-compliance with WorkSafe BC requirements and regulations, and it is very much constraining today's operations of the volunteer fire department. These are all reasons that we were brought in to take a look at the facility and to take a look at the feasibility of moving it to some other location in the area. So the next slide, please. The project was very sensitive to the need to evaluate the performance of the current fire station and look at the impacts of moving it out and about. Oh, there we go. Of moving it out and about in some other location. The analysis of the village really made it clear that there's no viable site down in the bottom. That any move of the fire hall would need to be up on the bench, up out of the floodplain. Virtually that whole segment, and I'll show a little map here in a minute. We were really concerned about ensuring that any service level amendments that would come with moving that station actually improve the overall performance of the system. And that included response times and the positioning of apparatus and equipment. Your volunteer firefighter staffing model is a critical element of the delivery of effective, sustainable services in that area. And that means that the fire hall needs to be able to support that, which the current station is quite limited in. While there were no specific response time standards that have been adopted by the fire department or the regional district or village, the fact of the matter is there existing response time standards that exist just by the nature of where that fire hall is located and the services that it's provided, that has impacts on things like insurance and insurance premiums, confidence in the community, the ability for the populated areas of the village and regional district to develop and affordable housing and things like that. And it's really important, becoming more important as fire underwriters survey as we're listening to what's happening in the insurance world, that the fire hall be in a place where it can support operations, support effectiveness and efficiency, and provide services consistently across its response zone. As we're seeing in all sorts of jurisdictions, insurance is becoming more expensive, if at all available. So these are all factors that we took into account as we were looking at things. Okay, the first trick is you have to be smart. Oh, it did go, good. We've talked a little bit about the floodplain exposures. It's a map. It's a hard map to read. I grabbed but what it shows is that the entire river valley is in a floodplain. Part of the requirements for a new fire station is it needs to be built to a post-disaster standard, which means that it survives the potential disaster. Originally, that was mostly talking about seismic risk. Now it's talking about floodplain exposure, wildfire, interface fires, all those sorts of things. So that starts to narrow where a fire hall can go. Access limitations, that highway doing the hairpin curves through the entry into the valley certainly creates challenges. And the fact that all of the vacant land in the area is agricultural land reserve, all complicate siting considerations and expedites the need to really get everybody engaged in figuring out what the future looks like. So the first thing that we think needs to happen is the communities that are being served need to understand that there's a problem that needs to be resolved. One of the worst possible things that can happen is you arrive with this bright and shiny solution to a project your ratepayers don't know for a problem they don't know they have. We believe that it's a priority for the regional district and the village to understand that your fire hall doesn't meet WorkSafe PC requirements. It's not able to look after the needs of the volunteers that are so unselfishly serving the communities and the region. There has to be a clear identification of the drivers for replacement of the fire hall. And that's a big part of the community information process, so that they understand the what, the why, the where, and at some point down the road, what that means from a cost and service level perspective. They need to understand the rationale for a new site, and we did run evaluations on various locations just to see what that looked like. You have some latitude north and southeast from the current fire station on top of the bench that has minimal implications for existing customers of the fire department. We've done a number of these types of projects. The community deserves to know because they're going to pay many hundreds of dollars per square foot to put a new building in place. They need to understand the key drivers for things that you're going to put into that building. We got in all sorts of trouble in one for it was a health space in the building for some weights and it wasn't about competing with existing community assets. It was actually a part of the decontamination and health program for the firefighters when they're exposed to high stress environments and when they're exposed to products of combustion. These are things people will understand if we provide them with the information and knowledge they need. They also need to understand the benefits for the communities that are being served. There's all sorts of value that a fire station brings to the community or can bring to the community when it's purpose built for it. And I will caution this, we make no reference anywhere at estimated costs. That's a fool's gambit. The fact of the matter is if you can forecast what something's going to cost in a week, you've got a better crystal ball than we do. The fact of the matter is that estimating or guessing about cost puts a number out in the world that everybody will remember. It's really important that you go through a process of development, of establishing what that fire hall needs to be, what it needs to look like, what's going to be in it, size, space, location, that sort of stuff. And then as a part of that process at an appropriate price, start to generate the pricing estimates and costing exercises. This is the first recommendation because it's the most important. It got its entire own slide in the process. The rest of this is procedural and kind of is intended to give you a bit of guidance as to what this process will look like as it rolls out. The fact of the matter is there needs to be a site established and identified, and procurement processes and whatnot going into that. The fact that there's so little non-agricultural land reserve land in the area, in a developable spot, means that the process to acquire that land is likely going to be longer than if it was just a private purchase or if we were able to make use of existing RDOS lands. Engagement with the design professional, because that is required in British Columbia, will help you start to plan what a modern fire station looks like. You've got, what, 70 years? 70 years of service out of something that wasn't purpose-built. To give you an idea of the timelines that you're talking about, a new purpose-built station, I can take you on a tour of several that are 100 years or better. So you've got, this is a long-tick decision. This is a major change in community. So it needs to be modern. It needs to be up to speed. It needs to meet new technical requirements. Training is becoming a more and more important piece of this process, and Fire Hall needs to be able to support that, whether directly or as a satellite piece of the facility. We don't know, but that's stuff that will need to be looked at. On your existing fire station, there has to be an interim measures plan. You are not in compliance with WorkSafe BC requirements for many aspects of that fire hall. So there needs to be a plan as to how are you going to mitigate those while the process of building a new fire station, which will take years. What are you going to do in the meanwhile to make sure that your employees and volunteers and whatnot are safe? We looked at the advantages or disadvantages of a split of a two-station model. It makes no sense for the call volume, population levels, any of those things. It just fragments an existing, a very cohesive little fire department that is in good position to service the community that it serves currently quite well out of a single station. And there are locations that support that. And finally, your current fire station is kind of a benchmark from a response time, travel distance, and all of that. You'll want to use that as kind of your baseline, and that's what we used in the report to support that. So that's kind of very high level. That's kind of what we think is a reasonable path forward. That starts to get you the detailed information that you require, the community engagement and support that you will need, all of those things to move this project forward successfully. Any questions?
Director Coyne.
I've got a couple questions. The first one is to Director Weeb. I know True was working on new floodplain mapping and everything for the village, just like they did for us. Have you guys adopted that floodplain mapping yet?
We actually had 2 different maps done. But I think, so yeah, it's been, it's in there. But I think the thing to keep in mind is, I mean, all the communities in BC that are in floodplains, I mean, you can't just say, well, we're all going to move to higher ground. That's not going to work. So some of the dialogue, but right. So some of the conversation then really needs to be about how do we preserve what we have and build for the future and have a conversation about those. But what was true, yeah, we had, I think there was an original LiDAR study, and then they did the actual one where they showed the
modeling,
the modeling of what worst case scenario, 100-year flood, what that might look like. So, yeah.
And then I guess the other question is to you guys, have you guys identified a location or a possible location that is outside of the floodplain that could be used for a new hall and whatnot?
No, we didn't. We arbitrarily picked some spots north of the city along the highway that had some open space, you know, as geographic geo points to figure out what response time impacts and things like that. But no, we haven't. it's complex and frankly, you as a group will have a better understanding of the area of available land of feasible properties that you can access. And to the floodplain thing, we're not saying that your community is unsafe in any way, shape, or form. What we're saying is for post-disaster building, sticking it in a floodplain isn't a good idea.
Follow-up?
Yeah, Princeton's going through the same thing right now. We're building a new fire hall outside of the floodplain, just because we know long-term, the fire department will be underwater in the next major flood that we have if all the modeling's correct. I mean, there's no way around it, right? So, but the constraints are there that it is now in our floodplain mapping. Our floodplain mapping does include the current fire hall. So to replace the fire hall, we have to, like you said, all the post-disaster, which is your seismic, which is your flood, which is fire, all that kind of stuff. So it is a major thing to consider. So that's why we put ours on the highest point we have up at the industrial park.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anybody online? No, not seeing any. I can add. And again, thank you very much for this report. And I've, of course, read what you've sent out. It's important. And I like the fact that you also highlighted that there's different ways to look at land uses. So for instance, like we've talked about post-disaster, but how much of a facility do we need to be that? What kind of equipment can we have elsewhere so that we can mitigate costs moving forward? But again, appreciate what you've done. I just wanted to ask, does Director Bush have anything to say?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering how we move forward with the location. We picked 3 sites, and I believe they're all on ALR land, are they?
Those sites, we kind of, they were vacant land pieces that we used for to kind of guide some scenario development. What I'd recommend is that we sit down with, I'm sorry, I don't know the RDOS's organization, but you'll have a lands group or yeah. So I would suggest it becomes an RDOS process to start to look at what's available land, what process needs to be engaged and move forward that way.
Any follow-up, Director Bush?
Nah.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We really appreciate all the hard work that you've presented. CAO, is there anything else that?
Nothing further.
All right, could I have a motion to adjourn the protective, I see, there we go. All in favor? Any against? All right, thank you. So now I'll pass this over to the chair.
Okay, back to Director Weed to reopen planning and development.
Resume at 11:55. And ask the question, Mr. Garish, if our presenter for section B is still with us?
Sounds positive.
Oh, perfect. Well, then once the technology and Mr. Garish and staff are ready, then please proceed with the presentation.
So while we're bringing the presentation up, just a reminder, Shawani is our summer student who's been helping us, or planning student who's been helping us with the snapshot for the RGS. And the snapshot's an annual requirement, and I hope I'm not preempting any of her slides, but just for the board's benefit, so it is the 2023 statistics that we're presenting, and I know we're into 2025, but it does take many months before the previous year's information is available to us. So you'll see 2024 in about 12 months, but Shawani is here to present 2023. So with that, I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you. So yeah, please proceed.
Afternoon, directors. So today I will be presenting the summary of 2023 Regional Growth Strategy Snapshot Report. So under the Local Government Act, once a regional district establishes a regional growth strategy, it must also implement a monitoring program and prepare an annual report to track progress towards the RGS goals. The regional district snapshot includes 16 indicators for monitoring progress aligned with the 7 goal areas of the RGS. Each indicator provides a description of what is being measured along with an analysis of trends in the report. For each indicator, we have provided a summary at the beginning of each section to give a quick overview of progress using 3 symbols. The green arrow indicates positive progress, while the blue equal sign means that there has been no significant change, and the red arrow shows that the indicator is moving away from the goal. Before moving on to the indicators, I want to highlight few assumptions and qualifiers. While the indicator were chosen with the goal of having annual data availability, this is not always possible as many indicators rely on census data, so which is only updated every 5 years. And to address this, population projection from BC stats were used for population-related indicators, and formula were applied where appropriate when data was not available. Now moving on to the indicators. As mentioned, the 16 indicators are divided into 7 goal areas. I won't be going through all of them, but we will highlight a few key indicators from each section. In the housing and development section, the first indicator is the percentage of housing start in primary and rural growth areas. In 2023, 75% of housing starts occurred in primary growth area, reflecting a 7% decrease from 2022. Meanwhile, the housing start in rural areas saw a 7% increase. Next is housing start by type, which measures the number of units by housing type based on building permit data. In the RDOS as a whole, single-family home construction declined from 256 units to 138 units, making up for 36.41% of total new dwelling units. Row housing construction increased from 36 to 55 units, and apartment unit construction declined from 449 to 186 units. However, this housing type still accounts for the largest share of new residential units at 49.08%. Next is median home price. This indicator uses home values from BC assessment and is expressed in 2010 CPI adjusted dollars. The median home price in the RGS area decreased by 9.4% in 2023, which is considered a positive change for affordability. However, despite this decline, median home price have not returned to pre-2021 levels. Similarly, this chart illustrates that while median home prices declined across most of the RGS area, the most significant decrease occurred in electoral area D and F. Other areas such as the town of Oliver and electoral area A experienced a moderate decline. In contrast, the electoral area I was the only location to see a slight increase in median home price. The next indicator falls under the section Ecosystem, Natural Areas and Parks. This indicator measures the average daily water consumption by using combined residential and irrigation uses data collected from the 11 water utilities in South Okanagan. Overall, the annual water use per capita decreased in 2023, reflecting a reduction by 32 meter cube in water use per person, or 87.5 liters per day per person. Similarly, the next indicator, average kilograms of daily waste landfill, showed a positive trend. This indicator measures waste disposed at the Campbell Mountain landfill and excludes diverted waste. Between 2022 and 2023, the total tonnage disposed at the landfill was decreased by 1.2%. This next indicator falls under the category of infrastructure and transportation. For this goal, we examine annual bus ridership data. Overall ridership in the region increased since 2022, with Penticton seeing a 17% rise. OCOS also experienced a sharp increase in 2023 with ridership jumping to 38.4%. Similarly, Summerland saw a substantial increase of 45.6%, with ridership growing from 14,325 to 20,858. Under the fourth goal, community health and well-being, the next indicator is annual crime rates. This measures the number of criminal code offenses but excludes traffic-related offenses. Updated data for 2023 is not yet available, so based on previous data, crime rates remains a challenge in RGS area. Under the regional economic development goal, we look at the number of businesses with employees. This means businesses that employ more than just the business owner. Between 2022 and 2023, the number of businesses with employees in the RGS area decreased slightly by 6 numbers, representing a negative 0.2% change. Next indicator measures the amount of investment in the buildings within RDOS, including civil common. The trend of increase from 2021 to 2022 is reversed in 2023, marking a 23.43% decrease. The second last goal area is engagement and collaboration. The Regional District of Okanagan has completed its first regional survey in 2024 to gather feedback on services and programs. The survey saw a good number of respondents with 224 responses from mail invitations and 327 general responses through online and paper submissions. And as per the survey results, the most important local issue identified was healthcare, followed by water quality, homelessness, and taxes. When asked about the quality of life, services, and community engagement, the majority of respondents rated their overall quality of life in their community as either good or very good. Similarly, most respondents also ranked their satisfaction with the services provided by the staff and local government as average or good. However, when it came to involvement in decision making and response to the feedbacks, the majority rated these aspects as either average or poor. Also, according to the results, email remains the preferred communication method, followed by RDOS website and Voyant Alert. The most preferred platform for providing feedback was surveys, followed by direct contact with staff or with elected officials and in-person public meetings or events. Lastly, the final RGS goal focuses on energy emissions and climate change. One of the indicators in this section measures average residential energy consumption. This data comes from the RDOS committee GHG inventory, but 2023 data has not yet been published. So based on previous data, residential energy use continues to show an overall increase. For the next steps, the snapshot report will be posted on the RDOS RGS monitoring webpage and will be distributed to South Okanagan member municipalities. And as a final comment, I would like to thank the planning team, my supervisor, GIS, and RDOS staffs from other departments who helped me gather the data to put together this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything further to add, Mr. Garish? Or we have a recommendation the board receive the 2023 regional snapshot. Councilor Director Coyne. Other hat. Yep. Someone else with the second, Councillor Director McCordov. All those in favor? Oh, yep. Oh, sure, sorry. Any questions? Director Holmes.
Thanks. So I think there's some really great information in this report, though it is a year old. And so I'm just wondering if it'd be possible for us to get the 2024 earlier.
Staff response?
It would be great if we could, but as I recall, and Shwani might be able to help me here, it's coordinating amongst a bunch of different agencies to try to collect all this information. And so there's always been a lag. And I think we even struggle to get 2023 data to you early in 2025. So I think it would be challenging for us to get everything to you as we do currently within the snapshot. I mean, there might be some statistics that are available earlier, but not the whole package.
Please.
So like I note under, for example, parkland, there was a decrease in Summerland of 8 hectares of parkland, but that was due to corrections in the parcel calculations. It just means there wasn't actually less parkland there. It's just it was incorrect initially. Whereas in Penticton, there was an increase in 7 hectares, and that's because the zoning was extended further into the water, which doesn't mean that there's more parkland in Penticton. It just means that there's the same amount of water that's now called parkland. So what I'm getting at is so I'm not sure if those are really valid indicators of the goal of protecting our ecosystems. So I'm just wondering, do we ever look at this and seeing, how the figures come about and say, well, maybe we need to fine tune our indicators?
Staff?
I think we share some of the concerns that were just expressed. And I know in the past we've talked about looking at potentially revising the indicators, but I mean, it is a challenge for us, even with the ones that we have, trying to get that information from agencies. And we're 15 years into the RGS now, which I know is not a reason not to change them, but changing the indicators potentially has implications for the previous 15 years of snapshots and how we're getting that historical picture on monitoring the RGS implementation going forward. So not that we're locked in, but it does make it challenging to change it over time. And I very much appreciate your concerns and the issues raised with parkland, because I know we've looked at that issue too, as we've done zoning updates and OCP updates and are changing boundary lines and what does this mean for our annual indicators, et cetera, et cetera. So.
And one, maybe staff can't answer this, but maybe Director McCordov can. So bus ridership, it's up 45% in Summerland. I know why that is, but it's up 38% in Osoyoos. Do we know what's behind that?
I think we have a larger bus and we have several stops within the town of Osoyoos, which makes it easier to take the bus. I understand that Oliver doesn't have as many as we do. And I'm glad to see that that it's increased, because people will go, they find it very economical. Go to Penticton, sometimes up to Kelowna, because that's available now. So I think it's a good thing. Well, we've had those number of stops for a couple of years, I think, but I think there's 4 or 5 of them, because it does cut a bit of a tour around town. So it helps to have, you don't have to come down to Main Street to get picked up.
I believe Dr. Changing all kinds of Director Barkwell has a question.
Yes, following up on the discussion here, this report is a lot less meaningful without some discussion and analysis of the reasons for the changes, like bus rides. We've instituted the free passes. So that's really where I think what we need, not a change in the indicators, but some reasons, some explanation why things went up and down, and that we could learn from. And maybe if something has proven effective in one community in an upward you know, it would be modeled, it would be copied, so. I think report bears a little bit more than just a report. We should spend some more time on it.
Suspect CAO has a recommendation for action tracking and implications that would have for staff time.
That was, I heard that loud and clear. A lot of this information would have to come from the agencies that supplied us the information, because we don't have the answer. We can ask, and if they provide it, then yes, it can be added.
Any further questions? Seeing as I forgot that part initially. We did have it motioned and second. Gratitude to Shawani. Thank you very much for the good work. We appreciate having students that can do the work that they're required to do to help get their degrees and allow our staff to be able to facilitate some of these things that I'm sure our action tracker wouldn't have room for. So all those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. Thank you. And I do believe that brings us to the end of this agenda for this committee. So, and I guess I have to have a motion to adjourn, right? There you go. A motion to adjourn and seconded. All those in favor? We are adjourned.
Thank you, Director Wiebe, and thank you, everybody, for your patience. We will see you the next meeting in February. 20th, yes.
Thank you.